Sean "Diddy" Combs sat in silence as the jury filed back into the federal courtroom in Manhattan. All eyes were on them. After nearly 2 days of tense deliberations, they were ready to deliver a verdict, but it wasn't complete. The jury announced that they had reached a decision on 4 of the 5 charges brought against the music mogul. 2 of those charges were related to sex trafficking. The other 2 accused him of transporting individuals across state lines for prostitution-related activities. According to courtroom reports, the jury either convicted or acquitted Diddy on those 4 counts, though the exact outcomes remain sealed due to the pending charge. The 5th charge, however, was different. It was the most serious one on the list: racketeering conspiracy. This charge accused Diddy of running a long-term criminal enterprise that used his business's connections and power to commit coordinated illegal acts. The jury told Judge Arun Subramanian that they were deadlocked on this charge. They could not reach a unanimous verdict. After more than 13 hours of deliberation, they were stuck. Instead of declaring a partial verdict, Judge Subramanian gave the jury firm instructions. He ordered them to keep going. He told them to continue their discussions until they could reach a final decision on the racketeering count, the charge that could carry the harshest penalty of all, including the possibility of life in prison. In the moments following that announcement, photographers in the courtroom captured what would soon become a viral image. Sean Combs, once known as Puff Daddy, now simply Diddy, lowered his gaze. His jaw tightened. His face, often hidden behind glasses and confidence, suddenly looked blank. To some in the room, it was just a flash of fatigue. To others, it looked like something else entirely the moment his mask slipped. The courtroom sketch artists caught it too. The drawing showed Diddy seated, staring forward, expression unreadable, but those present said his energy changed. The weight of what had just happened settled visibly across his shoulders. For weeks, Diddy had appeared controlled and focused inside that courtroom, but that single moment told a different story. Outside, reporters described the tension as unlike anything they had seen in years. This wasn't just another celebrity case. This trial had federal consequences, national media attention, and a backlog of accusations stretching across decades, and it wasn't over. The jury asked to revisit key testimony from 2 of the trial's most prominent witnesses, Cassie Ventura, who had filed a civil suit against Diddy months earlier, and Daniel Phillip, a former associate who claimed to have witnessed and even participated in parts of the alleged operation. Their testimonies had laid the foundation for the racketeering charge. By asking to review their statements again, the jury signaled that they were not taking the decision lightly. They weren't simply stuck, they were scrutinizing every word, every claim, and every inconsistency. Cassie Ventura's testimony was especially detailed. She spoke for hours about what she described as years of control, manipulation, and abuse. She claimed Diddy used his power and influence to isolate her, silence her, and maintain dominance over her life. She spoke about specific events, alleged assaults, financial coercion, surveillance, and threats. Daniel Phillip's testimony focused on logistics. He told the court how Diddy allegedly used his business infrastructure, including his music label, private security, and even promotional events, to move people and cover up illegal activity. Phillip claimed that staff were paid off or rotated frequently to maintain silence, and that a small group at the top controlled all internal operations. Together, their accounts formed the spine of the racketeering conspiracy charge. Prosecutors argued that this was not a case of isolated behavior. They said it was a network built and maintained by Diddy for years, with layers of protection and strategic intimidation. The defense rejected all of it. Diddy's legal team argued that the witnesses were not credible, that the relationships were consensual, and that the accusations were either exaggerated or fabricated. They pointed to inconsistencies in timelines, lack of physical evidence, and what they called character assassination driven by media pressure, but the prosecution maintained its stance. They said Diddy wasn't just another celebrity facing scandal. They called him the architect of an enterprise designed to exploit, manipulate, and silence. They cited financial records, text messages, hotel logs, and phone data, building what they believed was a pattern too complex to be a coincidence. Despite the scale of the evidence, the jury remained divided, and because the racketeering charge requires a unanimous decision, even one holdout could derail the verdict. That's why Judge Subramanian refused to let the case end there. He instead delivered what's commonly referred to as an Allen instruction, a directive that asks jurors to re-examine their positions and attempt to reach agreement without compromising their individual judgment. While this process is legal and not unusual, it also applies significant pressure on jurors. It forces them back into a room, often for hours or even days, to debate and defend their conclusions until either consensus is reached or a mistrial is declared. Meanwhile, outside the courtroom, the public reaction was immediate. The image of Diddy's face, serious, distant, and visibly shaken, spread across news outlets and social media timelines. The words "mask slipped" began trending. Some users said it was the first time they had seen real emotion from the man at the center of such serious charges. Others claimed it looked like fear. A few called it the expression of someone realizing that his reputation, his freedom, and his legacy might all be slipping away at once. No one from Diddy's legal team offered comment after the jury's announcement. They left the courtroom quietly, declining to speak to reporters. Prosecutors also made no public statement, choosing instead to wait until deliberations resume. Experts following the case say the racketeering charge is the real turning point. If the jury convicts Diddy on that count, the consequences could be more severe than any of the other charges combined. Racketeering carries higher sentencing guidelines because it involves organized criminal behavior usually associated with long-term schemes involving multiple people and acts of intimidation, fraud, or trafficking. At the same time, a hung jury on that charge could severely complicate the government's case. Prosecutors would have to decide whether to retry the charge separately or accept a partial verdict, a move that could draw criticism depending on how the other 4 charges were resolved. As the jury continues its deliberations, one thing is clear. This case has already left a permanent mark. What began as a civil lawsuit quietly filed by a former partner has now grown into one of the most closely watched celebrity legal battles in recent memory. And unlike other scandals that fade from the news cycle, this one is still unfolding in real time. As deliberations resumed, Judge Arun Subramanian instructed jurors to carefully review all submitted evidence before returning with a final verdict on the 5th count. He reminded them of their duty to consider only what had been presented in court, including testimony, exhibits, and sworn witness statements, and not to be influenced by any media coverage or speculation. The courtroom remained under high security as the panel returned to the jury room. Legal teams from both sides remained on standby while court officials prepared for the possibility of extended proceedings. No timeline was given for when the jury might reach a consensus, and the judge confirmed he would allow them the time needed to deliberate thoroughly. Inside the sealed deliberation room, jurors were granted access to all previously submitted evidence upon request. Among the materials under review were phone records entered by the prosecution, which they claimed showed coordination of interstate travel linked to alleged trafficking operations. Additionally, booking receipts, email correspondence, and internal documents from Diddy's affiliated companies were included in the exhibits for the jury to examine. One of the prosecution's key points centered around patterns of behavior. They outlined specific periods between 2015 and 2021 where they alleged that multiple victims were recruited, transported, and managed through a structure that involved personal assistants, security staff, and financial handlers. The government's case claimed these actions weren't sporadic, but structured, ongoing, and protected by influence, intimidation, and wealth. Defense attorneys argued against this characterization. They stated repeatedly that the prosecution's racketeering theory stretched beyond reason and relied heavily on implication rather than provable coordination. They called the charge speculative and unsupported by direct evidence that Diddy ever directed or sanctioned illegal acts in an organized way. In final arguments delivered before deliberation began, the defense reminded the jury that the burden of proof rests entirely with the government. They stated that personal misconduct, even if morally questionable, does not constitute a criminal enterprise. The lead defense attorney said that grouping unrelated claims together and calling them a conspiracy was legally flawed and unfair. Prosecutors countered by pointing to the consistency in witness stories, overlapping timelines, and communication trails. They presented diagrams showing interconnected roles within Combs's business and personal ecosystem. system, attempting to demonstrate that the same individuals repeatedly facilitated logistics that aligned with the crimes described. They argued that the pattern could not be coincidental and that the organization functioned with layers of protection that enabled criminal conduct to continue unchecked. The jury's ongoing discussion of this charge indicates the difficulty in applying the racketeering framework to the evidence provided. Federal racketeering laws require proof that a person participated in an enterprise through a pattern of racketeering activity, including at least 2 criminal acts within a 10-year period. Each act must be proved beyond a reasonable doubt. The prosecution offered a list of alleged predicate acts to satisfy this requirement, including trafficking, coercion, and financial manipulation. The defense objected to several of these, challenging the admissibility of some evidence and the credibility of the claims. Ultimately, Judge Subramanian allowed the jury to consider only a narrowed list of predicate acts that met the court's evidentiary standards. Meanwhile, the sealed courtroom continues to wait for a resolution. Only when the jury delivers a unanimous verdict on the racketeering count can the court formally record the full outcome of the trial. If jurors remain unable to agree, the court may declare a mistrial on that single charge, leaving the government with a decision to retry it separately or drop it altogether. If convicted on the racketeering conspiracy count, Diddy faces a maximum sentence of life imprisonment. Each of the other 4 charges also carries substantial penalties, but none reach the level of the organized crime statute. If acquitted, sentencing would still proceed on any convictions, but the public perception and legal weight of the case would shift significantly depending on the final result. The jury is expected to reconvene again in the following session to continue discussions. Legal analysts monitoring the case note that prolonged deliberation over a single charge is not unusual in federal trials, especially when multiple witnesses and overlapping allegations are involved. Until a decision is reached, the courtroom will remain under the court's order of silence regarding the 4 decided charges. Details of those verdicts will be released only once the 5th charge has been addressed or declared a mistrial. At this stage, no further witnesses will be called, no new evidence will be submitted. The case is entirely in the hands of the jury. As the jury continues its deliberation on the final charge, all eyes remain on the courtroom. The outcome of this single verdict could redefine the entire case. We'll keep you updated as soon as new developments emerge. In the meantime, comment your thoughts below and don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more breaking celebrity news.